Good morning, Grace. We're so glad that you guys are here this morning. It's Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is the lead up to Easter, where we remember that Christ fought the ultimate battle for us on the cross. And these next two songs that we're going to start the service singing just talk about how God is still fighting for us. He's still right next to us. So we'd love if you'd stand, you'd sing with us.
Fortress, a grace when my heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire standing next to me. There was another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden. Another died for me. There was another in the fire. Oh, there was another in the fire. Oh, all my dead left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, either way I won't bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire standing next to me. There is another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding what power set me free, there is a grave that holds nobody. Power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Whoa, there is another in the fire. Whoa, and I can see a light in the darkness. As the darkness bows to him, I can hear a roar in the heavens. As the space between where sin, I can feel the ground shake beneath us. As the prison walls cave in, and nothing stands between us. And nothing stands between us. I can see a light in the darkness. As the darkness bows to him, I can hear a roar in the heavens. As the space between where sin, I can feel the ground shake beneath us. As the prison walls cave in, and nothing stands between us. And nothing stands between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all the things unseen and this reckoning, and I know I will never be alone. And I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
God, we praise you this morning. 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 God, we praise you this morning you for this week. We thank you for the reminder of what you did for us on the cross, God, for sending your son to rescue us. God, I pray that we remember, no matter what season we're in, if we're in a season of struggle, obstacles, whatever that is, God, that we know that you are still fighting for us, that you're right next to us. God, we put our hope in you this morning. Pray these things in your name. Amen. Grace, you may be seated.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Happy Palm Sunday. Is that a thing people say? I think this should be something people say. Just happy Palm Sunday, because this is an amazing day. But I am here to let you know that today is also the last Sunday to sign up for small groups. And so if you want to grab your phone so you can access that link, or you can just grab the flyer right in front of you in your chairs so you can see what groups are available. This is the most meaningful way to get connected in a church, in a community. And I know, just sharing my story, because I overshare, that's what I do. But when I moved to U.S. 6 years ago, I knew I needed friends. I knew I needed a community. I didn't know anyone, or I didn't know anyone in the country, but I didn't know anyone here either. So I was like, okay, church small groups is the way to go. So let me do that. But groups is also very much like dating. We said this before, but I'm just going to say it again. You have to try multiple groups in order to find the one that you're like, wow, this is it. This is my group. But when you do, life is so much better. I found every single one of my best friends in the United States in Grace small groups. Those are the people that navigate life with me through the ups and downs, and life is just so much better with them because we grow together. We invest in each other's lives. And this is what we want for every single one of you. So if you're not connected to a group, this is your chance. We have groups for women that meet on Tuesday nights here at this location, groups for men that meet on Wednesdays. The youth group meets on Sunday evenings, and then we have groups for, I'm going to use this. We have groups for young professionals, for married couples, co-ed groups, racial unity focus groups. What I'm trying to say is there is a group for you. So don't miss out. Today is the last Sunday to sign up. We want you to get connected. We take our groups very seriously. Groups fill up really fast, so don't sleep on this. Just sign up and get connected. Thanks for being here today.
The first time that I ever saw the words, "a church for people who don't go to church," were on this postcard that I got in the mail from this church. And I remember looking at this postcard, and it was like, hey, Grace Community Church, and it was like, find your purpose, and had a lot of energy to the card. But one of the things that I just couldn't get past was it had these cartoon caricatures. And there was just something about them. I guess what the intent was supposed to be, but for me, they were just a little strange. You know what I'm saying? There's just a little weirdness to them. And so as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, man, I just can't do another weird church. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd had some bad church experiences, and so I was like, I just can't do it. So just as I was about to drop that postcard into the trash, I noticed on the back, at the very bottom, it said, Grace, a church for people who don't go to church. And I stopped, and I thought, you know what? If that means to them what that means to me, like what we've been talking about the last couple weeks in this series, if this is a church that's more focused on doing things for the community, right? If this is a church that is truly a safe place where no matter where you are in your faith journey, like you can ask questions and you can be real about your struggles and your doubts, then you know what? This might just be the church for me. And so I remember Becky and I decided, you know what? We're gonna give it a shot. And when we showed up, I just remember that first Sunday, I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was that I liked, but there was just something about it. It was like this church had a special sauce to it. Anybody a fan of special sauce? Like, man, I love secret sauce. I'm a huge fan of secret sauces. It seems like today, like every restaurant out there, every sandwich you order has some sort of a secret sauce. You know what I'm saying? Well, this love for me goes all the way back to middle school. Okay, in middle school, I remember in the cafeteria, we just got tired of just the standard ketchup with the fries, and so we started experimenting, and came up with this incredible combination of ketchup and mayonnaise. You've done this, right? Okay, you don't love it? What's wrong with you? This is incredible. All right. This was the secret sauce. And listen, for those of you haters out there, all right, this is actually a thing. You guys know what it's called, right? Yeah, it's mayo chup, okay? Heinz thought it was good enough to put it in a bottle, okay? So there you go, all right? So we've got mayo chup, and man, right downstairs, one level below, you guys know the restaurant that's here at Ballston Quarter, right? They have a secret sauce. You know what I'm talking about? Chick-fil-A sauce, right? Nobody knows exactly what the ingredients are. That's what makes it fun, right? Well, Grace Community Church has a secret sauce as well. And there are two ingredients in this secret sauce that are not only the essential ingredients of a church for people who don't go to church, but they're actually the key to a thriving relationship with God. And we find this secret sauce, we find these two ingredients actually in the Apostle Paul, who, for those of you who don't know who the Apostle Paul is, he was an early follower of Jesus and wrote a lot of the New Testament. And he was arguably the greatest Christian who ever walked the face of the earth. So we're going to take a look at these two essential ingredients of this secret sauce. The first one is humility. Humility. So check out what Paul writes here to the church in Ephesus, chapter 3, verse 8. He says, and I want you to just take in these words for a second. He says, I'm less than the least of all God's people. Isn't that amazing? I mean, this is a deep humility. He's just not saying, I'm not that great. No, he's saying, I am like the worst of the worst. Now, you might be thinking, why in the world is Paul saying this? The greatest Christian, arguably, ever. Well, it makes sense for those of you who know his past, right? Paul actually comes into the pages of human history in the book of Acts, that early history of the first church. And it says in Acts 8:3, Saul, which was Paul's Jewish name, it says that he was going everywhere to destroy the church. He went from house to house, dragging out both men and women to throw them into prison. Now, Paul then became a follower of Jesus, but I can't really think of a worse start for someone who's a follower of Jesus, who's gonna, be this great Christian leader. Can you think of a worse way to build your resume than by starting out by trying to kill Christians? That's not very good, right? So it makes sense that he was like, look, I'm the worst of the worst. I'm less than the least of all the Lord's people. But what's great about Paul, and I think what made Paul so powerful and effective as a leader, was that he wasn't just humble about his past, because, the past is in the past and we're forgiven through Jesus, but he was also humble in his present. And I want you to notice this. Some of you have read Romans chapter 7. If you've never read it, it's powerful. And look at what Paul says. He says, and this is now as a follower of Jesus, he says, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what's right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. Man, isn't that just so refreshingly honest and real? Can't you relate to the Apostle Paul here? You see what made him such an effective leader was, yes, he was great, brilliant theologian. Started all these churches across the Mediterranean region. But he was so humble. He was so relatable. So humility, an essential ingredient in this secret sauce. You know, the very first Sunday that Becky and I came to Grace Community Church after getting that postcard, I don't actually remember a lot about that service that was held at this little elementary school in North Arlington. There wasn't anything particularly noteworthy about it for me. But then I remember there was this young pastor named John Sly who got up to speak. Yeah. And I didn't know this guy from anybody, right? He gets up and starts talking. And I remember, you know, the message was compelling. He was clearly presenting, you know, whatever he was talking about from the Bible that day. But what really struck me about him and about that sermon was his humility. And again, don't remember any specifics, but I remember just thinking, wow, this is a guy who's saying things like, you know, I haven't necessarily completely figured this out yet. Or, you know, you say things like, I still struggle with this myself to live out these teachings of Jesus. And I remember that very first Sunday, I'm sitting there and I was like, you know what? This guy is real. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, and I just thought, I think that I can be real here in this church. Like, my struggles, my doubts, like, I can just be fully myself. And that very first Sunday, it's like I tasted that secret sauce and I was like, you know what? I'm in. This is a church where I think I can grow in my relationship with God. So humility is an essential ingredient in being a church for people who don't go to church. And it's also an essential ingredient in our Christian faith. It's critical. In fact, I would argue that if there's one virtue that's the most important virtue to embody as a Christian, it's humility. You might have heard this said before, but you've heard that if you were going to sum up the Bible in one sentence, how you could sum it up, right? There is a God, and you are not him, right? I mean, it doesn't get much more humbling than that, just big picture. And that's really such an incredibly important part of the Christian life. It's our humility. So the second ingredient in the secret sauce is confidence. Confidence. And we see that the Apostle Paul was definitely a confident guy. Now, where did all this confidence come from? Well, we have to look all the way back to, again, when we first are introduced to Paul. And again, this is before he was a follower of Jesus. Acts chapter 9, check out what happens to Paul. It says, as he neared Damascus on his journey, and by the way, this was his journey to go and round up more Christians and persecute them. It says, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground, and he heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? So of course, Saul asked, who are you, Lord? I am Jesus, whom you're persecuting, the voice replied. And for those of you who know the story, it goes on to tell us how Paul was struck down blind for 3 days, and then he was miraculously healed. Paul had this incredible God moment on the road to Damascus. This was the moment of Paul's conversion to Christianity. And so it's no wonder that he was so confident, right? I mean, that he could so boldly proclaim this gospel message of the good news of Jesus Christ. You know why? Because he had had an encounter with the risen Jesus Christ. I mean, think of what that would do for your faith. Think about that for a second. If you had actually had an encounter with Jesus, you've been like struck down blind, you'd heard an audible voice from heaven. That's incredible. So of course, he was courageous, he was confident, he could deal with all the different hardships and adversities that he dealt with in his life because he'd met Jesus. So he had this confidence. In those early days at Grace, I was struck by the boldness and by the confidence of this little fledgling church. I remember there were probably only like 50 people or 75 people at the time when I first was going to Grace. And I remember hearing about that this church was like running a full-on pre-K program for immigrant families that were feeding into the elementary school. And I was just thinking, there's no way. How does a church this small take on something this big? This is crazy. But you know what it was? It was boldness. It was confidence. This is a need. We're going to do it, and we're going to trust God for it. Man, that was amazing. And then, the other thing that struck me, and maybe it's struck some of you all, there was no passing of an offering plate. Did anybody else think that was weird? The first time that you came to Grace, and it's like, why don't they pass an offering plate? Like, for me, I was a finance and accounting major in college, and I started out in the business world, and I'm like, do they have any idea how much money they're forgoing by not just pass the plate, man? Like, people will put money in it, and you'll get more money. And I was a little bit like, how is this church surviving? I thought that was a little bit weird. But when I really stopped and reflected on it, I realized how brilliant that was. Because first of all, what's one of the biggest beefs that people have with church today? It's money. So guess what? They're like, you know what? We're just going to take that right off the table. That barrier, it's not going to exist at Grace. We're not even going to take an offering. And then I was thinking, how bold, how confident is this church that they would say, we don't need to pass a plate to kind of like induce any sort of feelings of guilt or obligation to give, but instead, we're gonna trust God, right? We're just gonna be confident in God. This is God's church, and He's gonna put it on the hearts of His people. Those who want to give are gonna give. And that was so powerful to me. I just thought, man, the way that this church is trusting in God, such confidence. Incredible. So therein lies the secret sauce of a church for people who don't go to church. It's humble confidence. That's the sauce. Humble confidence. And when you've got those two things working together, man, that is the stuff, okay? It's delicious. You just can't resist it. You want to put it all over your sandwich, all right? And you've experienced this. For those of you who love Grace, you know what I'm talking about. This humble confidence. You feel it when you walk in, don't you? I mean, you feel it in the smiles on the people's faces that you see. It's that confidence they have, that hope and that joy, that love of God that's just kind of pouring out of them. But it's combined with something else. It's a humble spirit, isn't it? You get this vibe that, hey, we're no better than anybody else. Maybe you haven't been to church in a long time. It's cool. We're all exactly the same in the eyes of God. God loves us exactly the same. For those of you who've participated in a small group here at Grace, you've felt that humble confidence, right? It's being a part of a group where there's a deep humility to be able to say, you know what? This is my struggle. This is my big question. I don't understand this about God. These groups are safe places where we can be real, where we can be humble about what we're dealing with, what we're going through. At the same time, there is a confidence in those groups. You know what? We're going to turn to God. We're going to look to His word, and we're going to come with faith and expectation that He's got something in there that's going to help us. And we're going to get on our knees, and we're going to pray, and God's going to show up in our lives. This combination, this secret sauce, this humble confidence, man, it is so powerful. Now, by the way, and I know Anna already talked about groups a little bit, but I just have to say, if you're not in a group, you've got to try one. You got to try one. Life is hard, isn't it? I mean, it's challenging today. And you know what? I think it's just too hard to do it alone. So here's what I want to encourage you. if you're not in a group and you're like, Derek, I get it. You guys talk about groups, multiple times through the year. But here's the thing, Derek, I'm just not a groups person. Like, I don't do groups. Well, I have great news for you, okay? We are a church for people who don't go to church. And we have groups for people who don't go to groups. It's actually how we've designed the groups. And on a serious note for a second, seriously, if you like this church, okay, you've experienced the secret sauce, and maybe it's been more of a Sunday experience for you sitting in a row. But that secret sauce is also in our groups, for real. That humble confidence. And if you think you've enjoyed growing sitting in a row, man, I can't tell you how much more powerful it is when you're sitting in a circle and you have people who actually know you. It's powerful. So again, last day to sign up for groups is today, and I really encourage you, take a shot. What do you have to lose? All right, so I've been talking about Paul, and been talking about Grace Community Church and what this secret sauce looks like for our church. But I want to talk for a minute, just on a personal note. What does this look like for you personally? Like, how do you get this humble confidence in your life? If this is such an essential part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and if this is the stuff of great leaders, like, how do we get this humble confidence more in our own lives? I want to give you two things. The first one is this: push into your need. Push into your need. Now, I want to tell you what I mean by that. So we have the Apostle Paul. And we've already talked about how, he struggled just like all of us do in his life. But there was one struggle in particular that he talks about. It's famous. You probably have heard about this even if you haven't spent much time in church. Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. He says, I was given a thorn in my flesh. Now, we don't know what that thorn was. Okay, there's much debate about what the thorn was. We don't know, but he was clearly struggling with something. And check out what he says in verse 8. He says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. 3 times he pleaded. Now, notice what Paul says next, because God doesn't remove the thorn. And that's very interesting. God doesn't remove the thorn, but instead, verse 9, Paul says, but he said, God said, my grace is sufficient. And check out these words, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Now, this is so important, particularly if you're struggling to figure out, how do I feel more connected with God? Maybe you're struggling, you're struggling for motivation. You're having a hard time right now in your faith to get motivated and to connect with God. Paul experienced God's power through this need. He pleaded with God. I want to ask you, when's the last time you pleaded with God? Because it could be that the reason you're struggling in your faith is because you've sort of lost sight of your need for God. I know I do that sometimes. Like, I'm good, right? It's like everything's sort of rolling along. I don't really need God that much. You got to push into your need. Find something that you honestly need God's help with. It could be some struggle you're going through. It could be a relationship. I don't know what it looks like for you, but there's got to be something where you can legitimately say, God, I need you. You see, when we push into our need, it activates God's power in our lives. So, push into your need. The second thing, and this is more in the realm of the confidence part of the sauce, push into his love. Okay, push into God's love. Now, we talked about how Paul had this amazing moment on the road to Damascus. That was his God moment. And what Paul would do is time and time again, he would come back to that moment. That was his moment where he knew God loved him and had this incredible plan for him. It brought him all the confidence he needed in his faith. What's your God moment? Do you have a moment where God was real to you? And do you return to that moment? Today is Palm Sunday. This is a God moment in and of itself. Palm Sunday, it's the start of Holy Week leading up to Easter, and it's the day where we remember the people of Jerusalem taking out these palm branches and waving them as Jesus rode into Jerusalem to lay down his life for us. So what we're gonna do on this Palm Sunday is we're gonna celebrate communion together. So I'm gonna ask our music team to go ahead and come out, and our ushers have communion elements. If you didn't get communion elements when you first came in, just shoot your hand up, and our ushers will make sure that you get some. Communion is open to everyone at Grace. And really, what I wanna do right now is just to give you a few moments, just to get quiet, okay? So you may wanna close your eyes right now. Just sit and be still. Maybe you want to reflect on your need and his love for you. We're just going to take a few moments of silence, just you and God. And then we are going to celebrate what communion means, what Jesus has done for us, what he's done for you. So just take a minute right now. So on that last night that Jesus was with his disciples, they were having one final meal, and Jesus was explaining that they had a really big need. They actually needed him to go to a cross, to lay down his life, so that it no longer mattered how great of a life that they had lived. It was about the life that he had lived. And so Jesus took bread. Go ahead and peel back the top layer of the elements there. And he said, "This is my body. It's given for you. Take and eat." Let's eat together. In the same way, he took the cup and he said, "This is my blood given for you. Let's take and let's drink." Let me pray for you. God, as we kick off Holy Week, as we think about you laying down your life for us, God, help us to remember that we truly do need you in our lives. Help us to stay dependent on you. And God, help us just to stay in touch with your love for us, God. We want to be people who are both deeply humble and supremely confident, God. Please help us. We thank you. In Christ's name, amen. We're going to sing one last song to celebrate today. Please go ahead and stand and sing with us.
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope and without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. And the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings.
And woo, we did that in run through too, didn't it? My gosh. Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. Humble confidence. Pastor Derek for giving us that word 2,000 years ago. Jesus rode into a very famous city with humble confidence. And then he says for us 2,000 years later to reflect his attitude of humble confidence in a very famous city. Now, we're never supposed to do logistical stuff at the end of a service, but next week is Easter, yes. So just one piece. This will be very short. I know you're standing, but this will be very short. So next week, I want to talk about something that I have seen. It's something that a lot of churches, we think about that as we try to connect with God spiritually, it seems like we're either thriving or we're diving, right? But that's not really the case. We're usually mired in mediocrity. That's usually where we're mired in mediocrity. But Easter is really the answer to that, and this is what we want to talk about next week. Now, we've been trying to improve things every single week here. And one of the things I want to focus on just right now real quickly is parking. If you have a bad parking situation, we want to know about it, but we've made a major breakthrough this week, and we think that parking is going to be much better today and even better next week, okay? So that's something to be excited about. You know, I'm excited about it because it's something we wanted to solve. Now, lastly, if you are new to Grace, I'd love to meet you right over here, right by those stairs right there to do something we call Grace in 5. In less than 5 minutes, I want to talk about why grace. Why grace? All right, everybody, have a wonderful Holy Week. God bless you. We're so thrilled that you've been here today. Look forward to seeing you next week. God bless.
And the Church of Christ was born, and the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shines.